I'm not giving up.
I am selling the building.
The final season of FX's The Bear.
The restaurant is flooded.
Everything's either gonna be okay.
No, stop!
Or not.
We are outgunned and we are outmanned, but we have each other.
FX's The Bear, the final season. All episodes now streaming on Disney+.
Hi, and welcome to Kay Let's Talk, the podcast where we break down storytelling across books, television, and film with a special love for book-to-screen adaptations. Here, we talk about craft, character arcs, structure, dialogue, visual language, and the creative choices that shape how a story lands. If you like thoughtful conversational deep dives into the stories you can't stop thinking about, you're in the right place. Let's talk. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. This week, we're doing another Heated Rivalry Q&A with some listener-submitted questions, and all of these have to do with The Long Game and Season 2. So if you are someone who is looking to avoid spoilers for The Long Game or leading up to Season 2 of Heated Rivalry, this episode will not be for you, sadly, but you can come back to it once the show airs or after you read the book. So that's a warning for everyone who's looking to avoid those spoilers that we will be discussing events from The Long Game. As always, thank you to the people who submitted their questions to me. I really, really love getting so many of them in all of my socials. So if you have a question that you want me to discuss in a future episode, please feel free to drop it in my Instagram or TikTok messages, and I'll be happy to add it to my list for a future episode, and we can chat about it with everyone else who listens. So without further ado, let's get into it. So this first question is, I absolutely love this book, but the Shane and Ilya wedding scene, the ceremony itself, felt so disorganized that it nearly disappointed me. Why did both of them treat it like it didn't really matter? Or maybe I missed something deeper in the meaning behind their attitude. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So in the book, there's definitely a very casual approach to their wedding. They send out the invitations to their wedding in May and plan to hold it in Ilya's backyard in Ottawa in July. And it's to take place a week before their charity camps begin. So it's very quick turnaround. And they had said to whoever happened to be in Ottawa, they could come. There was no pressure around it. And then they planned to do a honeymoon to Spain at the end of the summer, and that was per Scott Hunter's suggestion. Then in the book, they also recorded a video for Instagram that Ilya posts on his own page where they publicly announced that they were getting married in July. So the wedding itself wasn't a complete and total secret, and there was some semblance of planning that went into it. But a lot of the motivations behind this more casual wedding that they plan, I think can be found interwoven in earlier scenes from Heated Rivalry and The Long Game. And there's an element and a moment when I was reading the wedding scene where I made a note, and it's when Ilya is talking to David, who's helping him with his cufflinks. And Ilya thinks about how his father would not have been there. And even if he were alive, he wouldn't have been there. And Ilya wouldn't have wanted him there anyways. And that passage made me think about all the types of conversations that Shane and Ilya could or would have had about their relationship and how that would inform the type of wedding that they wanted as they were planning it, especially considering that they had the wedding with the Pike kids first. And the Pike kids' wedding in The Long Game is not the first time we see Shane and Ilya wrestling with the reality of their relationship and how it differs from a traditional one, because in the My Dinner with Hayden scene, which is sort of the epilogue of Heated Rivalry, it takes place in between the end of Heated Rivalry and the beginning of The Long Game. But that scene in particular gives a ton of context into what they both feel and how they feel about having to hide, which is, again, why I think it will be really important that they include this scene or some part of this scene in season 2 of Heated Rivalry, because not only does it establish the relationship dynamic between Ilya and Hayden, but it also has a very important conversation between Shane and Ilya that takes place after that dinner that they share with Hayden and Jackie. Shane reaches a breaking point in that scene because they spend a whole night with Hayden and Jackie watching a heterosexual couple be in a relationship, and how they navigate the world is so different to how Shane and Ilya have to navigate the world. And it frustrates him because it underscores everything that he and Ilya cannot have. And so you see in that passage that the two of them frame the problem differently. And it's a perfect way to tee up the core conflict that we see in the long game, because in this excerpt, Shane is focused on what has been taken from them. He's angry that Hayden and Jackie can exist with one another in public. They got to date openly. When they met, the night they met, they made out with each other on the dance floor. They got engaged, and Hayden got to bring Jackie around to the team, and everyone congratulated him on their engagement and for their relationship. And that has always felt unattainable to Shane. And he's tired of hiding and having to steal these moments with Ilya and not being able to live openly like his friends. Ilya comes at it from the opposite direction. He does not focus on what's been taken from them or what they lack. He is always focusing on what they have. Shane talks about wanting a normal relationship, and Ilya admits to Shane that he doesn't dwell so much on the unfairness of everything because what they have together, even though it's a secret, is still more than he ever thought that he'd have. He tells Shane, "Maybe I don't think about how it is unfair because I feel lucky. This is more than I have ever had." And that line reveals that for Ilya, he never truly believed that he'd have any of this. Not Shane's love, not a family, not stability, not a future together. And so the relationship itself, even hidden, has already exceeded his expectations. And so Shane is sad about the life he feels they cannot have, and Ilya is grateful to have this version of life at all because he never expected that it would be possible. And that difference in perspective continues all the way through their story and into the long game. So by the time we reach the wedding with the Pike kids and we see this dynamic playing out again, Shane is initially uptight about the kids knowing that he and Ilya are together. And when they suggest that they marry them in the living room, he eventually eases into it, and he gets emotional about being able to marry Ilya in front of other people. But initially, the concept that these kids could know about them and simply not care is genuinely surprising to him. Whereas Ilya, on the other hand, is thrilled to have anyone see them for what they are, which is a couple who are in love with one another. And so he's already in a place where he's more willing to believe that people could accept them. Later on, after they leave Hayden and Jackie's house and they're back home, we see again how Shane approaches this little glimpse of acceptance very differently than Ilya, because Shane recalls sitting on the couch at the Pikes with Ilya's arm wrapped around him while they all watched a movie with the kids, and how nice it was to be around other people without it being weird. And he notes how Hayden wasn't uncomfortable with it, which means that his automatic assumption was that Hayden would be uncomfortable with it. Shane and Ilya both say to each other that the day was nice. And the word nice here is loaded because, again, this type of normalcy is something that they have not yet been afforded or experienced together in their story. When Shane puts the plastic rings down that the girls used on them on the coffee table, Ilya says to Shane, "The kids didn't care." And Shane asks about what? And Ilya says, "About us. They knew and they did not care." And so this is when Ilya is trying to gently point this out to Shane, because again, Ilya is starting to become more optimistic about what it might look like if other people knew about their relationship. And he's testing the waters and trying to inch Shane closer to being in alignment with him on that front, because even though he's incapable of communicating that he wants people to know about them, and he understands the risks and why Shane is not willing to let people know about their relationship, it still bothers him because he wants to be able to be optimistic about it. This is when we then get a window into where Shane stands on, more people knowing about their relationship, because his reaction is that he was surprised that even little young kids who love them didn't care. He's surprised that they didn't care. And he had no idea how Jade and Ruby would have known that Ilya and Shane were a couple, which, as readers and viewers who have watched how Shane and Ilya interact with one another, it's unsurprising that Jade and Ruby would pick up on them being a couple, because Shane is very obvious about how he feels. He conveys so much of his emotions with his eyes, especially when it comes to Ilya. And Ilya is not exactly hiding it as much by this point in the story either, because he is tired of hiding. And so I'm very excited to see how they bring that physicality into season 2, because these two are not as good at hiding as they think they are in the book. And we also get a few times when they're discovered, especially in the beginning of the long game when Ryan Price finds them in the locker room again. Originally, that takes place kind of in that in between of Heated Rivalry and the long game. I'm curious if they're going to kind of blend that scene together and have him discover them in the beginning of season 2. I think that would be a funny way to kind of point out how the two of them are not that good at hiding. Shane then thinks to himself that he was sure Hayden and Jackie wouldn't have told the kids about them, but they had known and accepted it and then insisted that they get married. So he's recognizing that that feels good, because Shane didn't believe anyone would accept them as a couple. And then by the end of that night, they ended up getting into a little bit of an argument about it, because Ilya thinks Shane cares too much about other people's opinions. And Ilya's reaction is one of the more obvious moments where his depression rears its ugly head, because it prompts Shane to ask him if he's okay and to point out that he doesn't think that he's okay. He doesn't seem okay, but Ilya says no and shuts it down. And that's a whole other conversation in regards to his depression and how it's handled in the book. By the time we get to their actual wedding, though, in July, by the end of the long game, they probably assumed that a lot of people would not support them, because that is how they had been navigating their relationship from the very beginning. Naturally, that undercurrent of doubt and fear would spill into the planning of their wedding, even subconsciously, and in particular for Shane. So given that assumption, they would plan a day for themselves first, and if people wanted to join them, they could, but they wouldn't be banking on that. In that wedding scene, we're first with Ilya in his point of view, getting ready with David. And there's a moment where David says it's not fair that he doesn't have his family here on his wedding day. And Ilya corrects him and says his family is here. And to me, this links his sentiment from the My Dinner with Hayden scene back to this wedding, where he is simply happy to be marrying Shane Hollander at all. And he'd be happy if all they ever got was that wedding in front of Jade and Ruby, because marrying him in front of people at all seemed like an impossibility for so long to him. He was simply happy to become a part of a family that loved him back, and a family that had faith that Ilya was deserving of their son. For Shane, he starts off the wedding upstairs with Yuna looking out the window, and he can't believe how many people were in their backyard for their wedding. And he admits that he is surprised because he hasn't felt very popular lately, given that they were outed. He is always very in his own head, to the point of having blinders on to the world around him. So this wedding is proof that there are more people to support him and them than he's ever allowed himself to believe. When he and Yuna walk downstairs and through the living room, in his internal dialogue, Shane points out that the framed photos were on the walls of him and Ilya, and that they were only hung up a few weeks ago, and he still had the urge to hide them, even though he feels happy to know that there's nothing to hide anymore. And so Shane has to confront how much of his life up until this point has been shaped by his expectation of rejection. And he wasn't wrong to expect rejection, because he did end up losing people after they were outed, especially with the fallout with his team. but there are still dozens of people in his yard who chose to show up for him and Ilya. So like Ilya, he has to stop looking at what he's lost and start focusing on what he has and meet Ilya in that more present headspace. But at the heart of everything, I think the casual wedding makes perfect sense because neither of them spent years imagining a dream wedding. They spent years thinking that a wedding or even calling each other their boyfriend would never happen. And Ilya spent years convincing himself that he didn't deserve love from anyone, let alone the man that he loved. And so the wedding matters deeply to them, but the details surrounding the wedding do not. And I don't think it's because they don't care. I just think they don't care about the venue or the guest list or the music or the spectacle of it because they never dreamed about those things. They dreamed about being able to stand next to one another and hold each other's hands. They dreamed about being able to spend a night together or a week together. They dreamed about introducing each other to people that they loved and having their worlds intersect. They dreamed about getting more than a hotel hookup during their seasons together. They dreamed about calling each other a boyfriend. And then maybe one day, years down the road after they retired, possibly getting to be together. So they never dreamed of getting all of this, not now at least. I think everything else to them is a bonus. So I always circle back to the concept that it is not that the wedding didn't matter or that they didn't put much effort into it. I think they both were content to be married by kids in a living room, and everything beyond that was more than they had ever allowed themselves to dream of. And that is still enough for them. And Shane was always thinking about what they didn't have and how unfair that felt. And at their wedding, he has the support that he never thought they would have. And that would be a huge realization for him. And Ilya has always just simply been grateful because the relationship that they did have was still more than what he ever had before. And by the wedding, he feels fulfilled and he's working on his depression and he has a family now. And I think the simplicity of that is authentic because it centers on the notion that they were planning around the possibility of never getting to have a wedding at all, and therefore the wedding reflects that lack of planning. This question is, what do you think about the wedding song chosen in the book? Will they use the same one in season 2? So this is a funny topic of conversation that I see a lot of people speculating on for season 2, and I come at it from a few different angles, so I'll break those down one by one. The first thing I want to point out is that I don't personally define Diamonds as their wedding song because if I'm being annoying about it, they technically did not pick a wedding song. And in the scene in the book, Shane walks up to Ilya and Hayden, who are having a conversation in the house, and he says that Una wants Shane and Ilya to dance because it's a wedding thing. And Hayden gawks at them for not picking a wedding song. So that's confirmation that they didn't pick one. And Ilya points out that Shane doesn't know any songs. And Shane asks if they should just have whoever's in charge of the music pick a song and they'll dance in the middle of the lawn. And that worries him because he doesn't really know how to dance. And that's when Ilya walks them outside and asks Harris to play something romantic and short. And Harris is terrified that they're letting him, of all people, choose the song that they dance to. So Ilya just tells him, put on whatever, it's fine, just have it be something short. And that's when Harris puts on the song Diamonds by Rihanna. And in the internal monologue of Ilya, he admits that the song lyrics had always made him think of Shane. So I think in my head, personally, they don't have a wedding song, just a song that played at their wedding that maybe becomes a long-standing joke or a stand-in for a wedding song. Perhaps they just eventually decide that it is their wedding song, but they didn't plan a song like a traditional wedding would suggest that you do. So in my head, maybe this becomes their wedding song, but it isn't their wedding song. I don't think they have one. The second point about all this is that we know why Rachel chose to use this song in an interview during BookCon, where she said it's a product of the time that she wrote the book in. And she was asked by Swoon about the choice for using diamonds, and she recalled thinking that she couldn't pick something obscure. So she was thinking, all right, what's a realistic song that was popular at that time? Because it's supposed to be taking place in 2021. So what would a song that readers would know and Harris would have on his phone ready to go? What kind of song would that be? Would the lyrics make some sense for the situation at hand? And so that song is what she picked. And she also said that she had been listening to that song a lot while she was writing that book. So it was sort of a little treat for her to include it in the story. Rachel Reed has also seen some readers questioning whether it's truly Shane and Ilya's song. And she said, whatever song you like, you could replace it. But I felt like I needed to say a song. I couldn't just say Harris put a song on. I had to pick something. So I picked something I thought made sense as a pop culture reference, which I think makes sense. And then when you read the lyrics and you do see what the lyrics are and then frame it as Ilya thinking of Shane while hearing this song, the lyrics find light in the beautiful sea. I choose to be happy. You and I were like diamonds in the sky. You're a shooting star I see, a vision of ecstasy. When you hold me, I'm alive. We're like diamonds in the sky. I knew that we'd become one right away. At first sight, I felt the energy of sun rays. I saw the life inside your eyes. So you could easily frame that as something that Ilya felt when he saw Shane for the first time. Is it a little cheesy? Yes, but I think that's the point. The third angle of this is whether or not I think they'll use this song in the show. And Rachel was also asked about this in the panel, and her and I had the same thought, which is that the budget will be a huge factor in which songs are used in the show. And she said it'll probably be a Canadian indie song. And I know that when Jacob was still editing season 1, they had not gotten permission to use all the things she said up until the last minute. So I'll never say never, but it would be on the nose for them to use it. And maybe Rihanna likes Heated Rivalry. So that could open the door for that. But I do think that we can expect a song from 2021 because Jacob did an unbelievable job finding songs that were made or released around the time of each year that we watched on screen in season 1. So I do hope that consistency carries over. And I think the point of that scene is that they did not pick a song. They let Harris choose. So depending on the characterization of Harris in the show, perhaps he picks a song from his phone that feels more aligned with his character. And maybe we, throughout season 2, any scenes that he's in, we kind of get a sense of what his music taste is. And then by the end of the story, it feels appropriate that he pick the song that ends up playing. Or we could just have Jacob pick one of his favorite songs that reminds him of Shane and Ilya, and he slots it in there and they call it a day. But I think the fact that it's a pop song and the song choice is given to Harris in the book means that it's not going to be a traditional song choice. That's the whole point. Either way, I like the decision to have them not have a wedding song and then have Harris's choice haunt them as their wedding song. So hopefully it is still something that feels a little on the nose, a little pop culture reference, and something that on the surface doesn't feel like a wedding song, but the lyrics are applicable to their love story. And then we have another situation where the song choice makes that artist have a big resurgence or makes them popular again, or, you know, there's a remix that gets made into a TikTok sensation. I just think that the way that the music in this show has reinvigorated a lot of people's careers and thrown new artists into the spotlight is really cool, because the musicality of a show often, I think, isn't revered publicly as much as it should. And Jacob's wonderful decisions with the music and also the score by Peter, those two things together create the atmosphere around the show and heighten all of those scenes so much more. And the iconic moments from the show are iconic because of the song that plays over them. The club scene is absolutely iconic if you watch it without the music, but then you turn the music on and it changes the entire nature of that scene. So whatever song he picks, I have a feeling it will have the same effect. It will forever be synonymous with this wedding between Shane and Ilya, and it will be a really big pop culture moment again. So I think that's exciting to think about and consider and wonder, all the different scenes that I know are coming in season 2 of The Long Game. What song is Jacob going to assign to that? Is it going to be easier for him to get the rights to songs this time around, given the popularity of the show? That will be fascinating to see too. And I do selfishly, because I'm so interested in this nature of the business, hope that we get more transparency about how season 2 comes together versus season 1, because I think a lot of the interviews that I had watched Jacob give surrounding the nature of season 1 coming together and how they were editing the show well up until when it aired on HBO each week back in November and December, that a lot of the back end was really kind of thrown together in real time because of difficulties getting rights or difficulties editing or whatever it may be, the timeline of the release getting moved up. And season 2, I don't think a lot of people understand just how quickly they've turned this around. It is very abnormal that we get a season 2 this soon after a premiere of a show, let alone have the scripts written in this short amount of time. So I'm curious how many of the song choices are made when he's writing the scenes and he has them in mind already, or if we're going to have another situation where he'd like to use a song, he might not be able to get that song, and then he has to insert something else. And then we see once season 2 comes out how effective that song choice was and if it works properly, and if we have more of those really big viral moments like we did for episode 4 in the club scene, or the montage scenes that we got in season 1, how the music factors into that again. And then, of course, the score, because I think that there's so many opportunities for the score to be used to heighten the emotions. We know that we're going to have a lot of classical music again because Jacob has already revealed that. We're going to have a continuation of a lot of the theme music that was created for Shane and Ilya's relationship. And I love getting to watch a show where that happens. I think anyone who has been around my channel or my TikTok for a while knows that I love Outlander. Outlander has a theme song for the main lead characters. And all throughout the 8 seasons of the show, there's been some iteration of that main theme music that comes up at very specific and important, potent, emotional moments between the two characters. And it's very interesting how your brain ties itself to that melody and associates it so strongly with their love and their love story. And so Peter has the opportunity to do that again with Shane and Ilya and their theme music, and where and when he chooses to insert that is going to be very fascinating. So I could do a whole podcast episode talking about the musicality and what I hope to see and hear in season 2. So if that's something that interests any of you, please let me know, because I'd love to yap about that for a podcast episode. I think that would be a cool topic to dive into. And I've already done some breakdown videos about certain song choices from season 1, and those seemed to go over really well on my Instagram and TikTok pages. So I'd be happy to do a whole episode talking about that kind of content if anyone would be interested in it. But I think I'm going to stop there. I think these 2 questions go hand in hand with one another, and there's a few others that I have on my list. I have so many questions on my Q&A list, which I think is great because it will tide us over until season 2 comes out. But I like to lump them together in a way that makes sense so that we're not jumping around from topic to topic, and I feel like we're jumping all over the place. So I'm going to keep these 2 questions together, and then we'll record another Q&A and I'll lump some of the other ones together. I do have one coming up where I'll be focusing on hockey related questions because I've been getting a lot of those in the back end, and I hope people are watching the playoffs. Maybe you got into hockey a little bit more since this kind of lined up perfectly with the Stanley Cup playoffs. If not, I think that there's a lot of questions I've been getting about how the hockey will become a factor in season 2. And those are really interesting for me to think about, especially since I feel like as a hockey player myself, I can be so inside of the sport that when someone asks a pointed question about why something happens the way it does or why someone would behave the way they do, it makes me notice it more, if that makes sense. It's framed as so normalized for me, a lot of these things. And so when people ask questions and point out how it's not normal, it makes me really think hard about that. And I love getting that moment of reflection to think hard about something that's been so ingrained in my brain and look at it from another angle and try and explain it to someone who hasn't had my lived experience as a hockey player. So I always love getting the hockey questions. Keep them coming. As always, if you've made it this far in the podcast episode, I really appreciate it. I'm so glad that week after week, we're still here chatting about this show and that people want to listen to my take on so many of these story beats and how season 2 might be put together and created. And I just think that a good show creates discourse, and that discourse is important for people to recognize what makes the story magical and what makes a story successful and lasting and impactful for everybody. And that's what I love talking about. So I'm so thankful that everyone tunes in every week and listens and continues to ask questions about it. So thanks again, and I look forward to our next chat.